Life in Ilray was amazing, if you were fortunate enough to live in the city. The country had long ago established itself at the technological forefront of the orb, so the rich and powerful had all the best toys to play with, and the lower classes made do with the leftovers. Stanral, the capital, was the glittering jewel in the center of the land, and every corner was required to live up to impeccable standards. The parking station alone was nicer than anything in the Hollicks' borough. The parking guides aligned the carros on the first try, leading the family to the topmost floor, as befit their class. As they passed, the floors and walls gleamed as though they were just finished yesterday. Before the gull-wing doors of the carros had fully opened, Ronnie stepped onto the freshly finished surface and drank in her surroundings. She craned her neck upwards to look at the impossibly large buildings that towered over them, sparkling flawlessly in the mid-sol sunlight. It was love at first sight. Immediately, she knew she had to live there someday. She tore her eyes away from the titanic structures and looked back at her family. Julianne and Louis were watching both children expectantly, waiting for them to give their first impressions. Next to her, Nathan looked faintly ill, though he tried to hide it under a facade of indifference.
"Stanral is incredible!"
Ronnie exclaimed with a huge grin.
"The towers are even bigger in person! They take up so much sky!"
She kept looking at the skyline's massive heights all the way to the lifting platform. Julianne and Louis followed behind her, twin smiles on their faces at their daughter's enthusiasm. Nathan brought up the rear, also looking upward, though his face held wide eyes and a grimace rather than excitement. The platform brought them down several floors and deposited them with a friendly chime next to the entryway on the lowest level. Ronnie gasped as she saw a handful of parked Carossa that made the normal round ones on the trackway look like a toy. These were more tube-shaped, and the paint was sparkling and pristine. Her mom had mentioned that some people were allowed to control a Caros without guidance. These vehicles certainly looked like they were built for something like that. With a gentle tug from her mother, Ronnie tore herself away from the expensive-looking Carossa and followed them outside. Clean, open air greeted the family immediately as they crossed the busy street towards the museum. Nathan continued to lag behind, quietly humming a small tune and trying not to be noticed. The museum was an ornate building the size of a city block, with large white columns standing guard over the raised entryway. Along the walls were faux trans panes made of colored glass to give the illusion of being able to see inside. A large number of steps spanning nearly the entire width of the building led up to the entryway, adding to the museum's grandeur. The family ascended the stairway, feeling as though they were beggars approaching the court of a king. Each burning step reminded them just how out of place they were. They eventually reached the summit, and their calves were rewarded with a wide, flat surface to walk on for the remainder of the visit. On the right side of the facade was a kiosk sitting under a "Pay Here" sign. The screen on the front fired up and glowed a bright green as they approached, displaying purchase options. The parents exchanged a glance, as if to give each other confidence in what they were about to do. As life in Stanral was close to perfect for those who could afford it, those who lived in the various sanctions outside the city had a much more challenging time. The technological advances of the last 4 centuries meant that a new dynasty had arisen. Those who invented the gadgets that everyone now depended on accumulated vast amounts of wealth in a matter of years. They built the city as a testament to technology, and in doing so created an economic vacuum for the ultra-wealthy, leaving nothing for the utterly impoverished. Such trivial things, like a trip to the museum, cost a family living in one of the 7 outer sanctions nearly an entire year's wages. This was to be the Hollicks' vacation for the year, and the next year, and probably the next few years after that, too. They had saved for years in hopes of showing their children some culture, as well as some of their family legacy. Luckily, they had been able to save enough just before Nathan's lottery entrance, though they had cut it close. At least he would have one last family memory before going off on his own into the orb. Ronnie watched as her mother and father both swiped their right index finger across the ticket kiosk's screen. She unconsciously held her breath, begging the universe that they had saved up enough. The display hesitated, then transitioned from bright green to a soothing yellow. They had made it. Julianne motioned for her children to swipe their index fingers across the screen as well. Ronnie practically leapt next to her mother, eager to swipe and go inside. The surface prickled as she ran her digit across, and a chime confirmed she was registered. Nathan followed suit, still looking surly and slightly uncomfortable. Once all four had been approved, the yellow screen faded to black, and they were officially cleared to enter the museum. Ronnie had already taken 2 steps towards the entryway before Lewis put a hand on her shoulder to halt her. He had a serious look on his face, betrayed only by a small hint of his own excitement threatening to leak through. He gazed at both her and Nathan and said, "No, you remember why we're here, right? We talked about it before we left the stead this morning." His accent was leaking a little bit more than usual.
Yes, Dad,
Ronnie replied, the pride of remembering her father's lesson showing in her voice.
this place is telling us the story of your people. We're here to learn about the history of where our family comes from. It has art and artifacts made by our ancestors from across the centuries.
Ever since her parents had announced that they were going on this trip 6 monats ago, Ronnie had soaked up everything she could learn about it between counting down the hours until they would arrive. "That's right, Ronnie," her father lilted encouragingly in response. "The country of Pire is a beautiful land with a long history. There are legends that date back thousands of years, and this museum is said to hold the largest collection of Pirean historical artifacts in the country. Our learning centers here only teach the Ilraean side of cultural knowledge to you, so you're going to miss this if you don't pay attention today. Your Nona's dying wish was for you to remember her people and what they believed in. Since we can't afford to visit the country, I want you to absorb everything you can while we're here. And remember to have fun. Now, one at a time through the entryway. Nathan, you go first." Lewis eyed his son as he finished his debriefing. Nathan was still out of sorts. He kept looking back and forth from the ground to the entryway of the museum, as if trying to decide which would save him first. As soon as Lewis had said the word, Nathan all but ran inside. Lewis shook his head, slightly perplexed at his son's strange behavior. It was unlike him. Nathan had an elevated level of maturity for his age. Though it sometimes manifested in a dark sense of humor, he was still a good kid. He was never rude to people without a good reason, and he had a good relationship with his parents. He was even very close with Ronnie. Something must be bothering him, Lewis thought. Then again, he was at a tender age where mood swings were on the menu from endpoint to midpoint with all hours between, not to mention the stress of the upcoming lottery exams. Lewis decided to keep an eye on his son, but not press just yet. If he was still surly tomorrow, he would have a talk with him. But today was a day for the family, and he was not going to be the one to ruin it. Ronnie hastily walked, after being reprimanded by her mother, to the front entryway behind her brother. A sensor anticipated her presence and paced the door's opening, making it just wide enough for her to go through as she approached it. As she inhaled her first breath of the cooled, perfected air, the entryway sealed behind her, thrusting her into total darkness. The interior was entirely black, from the velvet-lined walls to the short pile carpet to the ceilings painted so dark it gave the illusion of being high and invisible in the blackness, despite in reality only being about 3 meters high. A red line appeared on the ground, and a sign suddenly glowed in a soft blue a couple of meters in front of her face. Ronnie stepped forward and read, "This museum was designed with a sensory deprivation overload philosophy in mind. There will be softly lit lines on the floor to guide visitors and help avoid falls. Once at a display, a bright light will descend from the ceiling, illuminating each artifact. In order to make the spotlight's appearance even more stark in contrast, each item is staged in its own small chamber. Each exhibit will be shown for 130 seconds. If you would like to spend more time enjoying the exhibit, press the descriptive placard and it will extend the countdown for another 2 minutes. Please enjoy your visit at the Piorean Culture Museum." Ronnie followed the dimly glowing red line away from the placard for a few meters until the first spotlight shone in front of her. An intricate mask glowed in the limelight, sparkling with teardrop-shaped jewels in varying shades from azure to teal. It was designed to sit on top of the head, acting as a covering only for the eyes and hair. Strands of ultra-thin sapphires clustered together at the brow, then feathered out over the hair wrap like a peacock's tail at rest. About a half-meter below the mask, a plaque emitted its own blue light, telling the coverlet's story. Ronnie leaned in closely and read, "Ancient Piorean clans were devout worshippers of their gods and goddesses. They would engage in numerous complicated rituals, each with their own meaning and consequence. This particular mask, from circa the last century of the pre-war era, PWE, is thought to be designed for an appeasement ceremony for Synia Agera the Temporal, in the hopes that she would deliver them from a plague. Ronnie inhaled sharply. That word. Synia. She knew that word. That was the same word that her mother and father had said. In all the excitement, she'd forgotten about the strange incident in the Karos earlier. It all came crashing back now. What was happening? How was all of this related? This trip was becoming weirder by the minute. She glanced around to see if she could find her parents, but they were nowhere to be seen. In fact, she realized with a sudden jolt, there was no one else to be seen at all. The museum was specifically designed to create a pure experience for the guests, and the extensive research poured into the building suggested that self-reflection was the best way to experience art and history. Each person who walked through the entrance was given a unique tour order, ensuring that there was no human interaction until the end. Ronnie was completely alone. Rather than give in to the slight panic that welled up in the back of her mind, she instead waited at the display for the next step. The light above the mask soon dimmed, and the red line reappeared on the floor, guiding her to the next exhibit. As she followed the line, the wan light behind her extinguished completely, and she was plunged once again into shadow. Her eyes had just adjusted to the darkness again when the next piece flared to life. This time, it was a scroll, painted with some substance that was still as vibrant today as it was when it was painted aeons ago. It depicted a fire, the flames swirling in some stylized pattern. The smoke formed into words in an ancient script that Ronnie could not understand. Below, another plaque glowed with the cool blue light, explaining the tale. Rendering of a cave painting believed to have been drawn in 2000 PWE. The cave drawings from which this scroll draws inspiration from are thought to come from approximately 5000 PWE, during a time of great calamity in PRA. The language that is written in the form of smoke is long lost. However, the drawings surrounding the words are similar to other ancient artifacts found from around the same era. There is generally some kind of element being depicted, mixed with varying colors and/or musical notation. Whether these are hymns or warnings is unclear, but their prevalence indicates they were worthy of attention. The fate of the Synia was intertwined with the people, even in ancient times. The orb felt like it was shrinking to Ronnie. 2 exhibits in a row now mentioned that strange word. What was a Synia? Whatever it was, it had to be a big deal. These beautiful relics using the same term as her parents couldn't be a coincidence. What she didn't know was how everything fit together. The solution to the puzzle rested with defining the word that haunted her. The red line led endlessly throughout the oversized building, briefly revealing pieces, only to hide them away again once she was ready to continue. She followed the path, hunting down items that would give clues to the mystery she was chasing. Exhibits lit up, shedding light on the past of a proud race of people whose culture was tied to nature and the elements. They believed that life had a balance and the line between senses was blurred. Intricately carved pots, delicate weapons made of whitewood and fire rock, armor gilded with images of some pantheon they worshipped, all tantalized the curiosity of the youth. Ronnie obeyed her father and absorbed everything that she read. Occasionally, they mentioned the name of Synia, but little else. Despite numerous items on display, the placards often had very little information about what they were for. It seemed like every other placard had a line like, "The content of the text is unknown due to the script being lost, making translation nearly impossible," or, "These are merely theories based on the limited information available on ancient PRA and history." Suddenly, the myriad displays stopped, and the crimson path punctuated in a circle just large enough for Ronnie to stand in. The abrupt end of the line made her nervous. She absent-mindedly tugged on a lock of her hair as she placed herself in the center. This time, the red path disappeared entirely, plunging Ronnie into complete darkness. For a second, she was terrified, fearing some kind of cruel joke or horror was about to descend upon her. Instead, a hole in the floor opened up in the center of the room, and light poured out in every color imaginable. The drastic switch from dark to light blinded Ronnie for a second, and she blinked several times before her eyes adjusted to the brilliance. It was only then that she noticed what was actually causing the light. A small platform rose up from the opening to Ronnie's eye level, held up by a thin rod no thicker than 2.5 centimeters. On the platform was a small icosahedron that could easily fit in the palm of Ronnie's hand, each side emitting a distinct color. The light pulsated and moved inside the token, casting shadows along the room, dispelling the mysterious effect that the near-complete darkness had held over every room so far. Instead, it cast a spell of its own. Ronnie was transfixed by the siren song of the heirloom. The colors danced as though there was a song playing that only they could hear. She even thought she could hear a faint melody resonating in the room, as though from a far distance. She shook her head, clearing her thoughts of the fog that had descended, and looked for the expositional placard that had accompanied every other display. She found it over by the far door, illuminated not by the blue of before, but instead by the same soft red glow that had guided her throughout the day. Its inscription read, "The Synia's Artifact. The crown jewel of the Piorean exhibit. This item has been authenticated as a Synia's artifact from before the Great War. These items were considered to be sacred articles of power for the Syniae, though some historians speculate that these objects were the actual sources of their abilities. According to one of the few legends that survived the war, each Synia was responsible for creating their own relic, or artifact. This would help them channel their power and use it on command. This particular artifact is thought to be for an elemental Synia, perhaps Synia Aliona the Colorful, or Synia Karoseth the Vivid. As there has been no actual proof of Syniae existence, it is more likely this was created by a powerful priest as an offering to his god or goddess. No magical powers have been found during testing." A soft chime rang out in the background, breaking the artifact's spell. The platform began its descent back into the floor, setting up for the next viewer. Still in a bit of a daze, Ronnie walked through the now open entryway beside the red plaque. At the end of a long, curved hallway, light beckoned her onward, marking the end of the tour. The bright light itself turned out to come from the gift shop, where Nathan was already waiting. The tall, lanky teen was rifling through some souvenir replicas that cost more than the family earned in a monat. He looked much more relaxed inside the museum than he did when they arrived. Ronnie sidled up to him, gauging to see if her big brother was in a talking mood or not. He continued to fiddle with a toy mask, not acknowledging her.
That was so cool. What did you think of the exhibit?
She gambled, testing the waters.
It was pretty cool, yeah,
Nathan echoed nonchalantly, putting down the mask and gently touching the pauldrons of the replica armor display next to him. He didn't look up. She tried again.
What about the artifact? It was so pretty. It reminded me of—
Shush! He suddenly sprang to life, turning around and putting his hand over her mouth.
Look, let's talk about it when we get back to the stead, okay?
His eyes were begging her not to say anything. She had never seen him look at her with so much worry and fear. She nodded, and he pulled his hand away. This day kept getting stranger and stranger. Their mother came out next, about 5 minutes after Ronnie left the exhibit. She was followed by their father after a similar period of time had elapsed. They both looked rather awestruck as they entered the gift shop. Once Louis regrouped with his wife and children, they hastily left the glistening storefront, trying not to draw attention to their lack of purchases. Twilight had fallen during their journey through time in the museum, and the glinting sunlight from before was now exchanged with artificial light emanating from the towering spires that surrounded the family. The return walk to the parking station was quiet and pensive. The experience had given all of them much to think about. Soon, 4 silent outsiders left their temporary vacation to the glittering throng and returned back to where they belonged. The small feeder track they were coasting on soon opened up to the main trackway, leading them due south of the city to their stead. A thoughtful silence still hung in the air until a baritone lilt softly filled the vehicle.
I hope you learned something today, kids. We have a proud heritage, and it's worth remembering, even if those frilly tech lords got some of the facts wrong,
He stilted.
I wish they'd mentioned anything about modern Pierre, but I guess it isn't as interesting.
His accent was always heaviest when he drifted into thought. He paused for a second in reverie, then shook his head and continued.
Nevertheless, your Nonna made me promise to teach you what we could on her deathbed. Do you have any questions about what you saw?
What's a Synia?
Ronnie barely got the word out before her mother interrupted, slightly louder than she intended. It's a term for their gods and goddesses, mythical creatures who were supposed to save the Piraean people from all manner of ills but never could because they weren't real. Julianne then changed the subject abruptly, attempting to distract a line of questioning out of her daughter's mind. Now, I don't know about you, but it's a long way back to the stead, and I know I'm going to be hungry when we get there. Who wants to help with rations tonight? Normally, any mention of Ronnie's latest hobby was sure to take her focus off of dangerous questions for at least an hour. At least, that was how it usually worked. Tonight, the young girl seemed to be distracted, far away from the orb. Ronnie gave a half-hearted approval for the promise of cooking, then settled back into silence as she stared blankly out the transpane. She was old enough to know something was going on, but her parents insisted on keeping it from her. With the conversation obviously ended, the rest of their long trek was made in silence. There was no music.